The production of this video was heavily sabotaged by reptilian entities through psychic warfare, vile telepathic attacks, weird evil nightmare inductions, sleep interruptions, parasitic energy draining, nasty energetic harassment, sick social scheming, and inflicted physical injuries. They are devious, sick, and dangerous pests that have an extremely detrimental impact on human civilization and life in general. You may be undecided as to what to think, but they know exactly what constitutes a threat to their interests. They know themselves and their interests best, and they are doing what they can to prevent information like the following from being revealed. It's easy to confirm. Whoever disseminates such information receives direct experiential insight, and quickly so. Are you ready for that, though?
I'm going to teach you the greatest lesson of all: responsibility.
Waves of maggots over oceans of rot. A dimension of pure chaos. Pure evil.
The attribute, one of them, as it is commonly used in the field of dark conspiracy investigation, is synonymous with individuals, groups, or collectives with a distinctly evil, dark, self-serving orientation and ambition. Death cultists, Satanists, Luciferians, infernals, and hostile alien forces. The dark spiritual polarity. While there may be differences and nuances, these are essentially the same thing. In general, or in principle, one of them means intentionally causing suffering, slavery, and death to humans or all living organisms. Hence, if one is not part of that, one is not one of them. Whether the suspicion that Trump is one of them is true or not can be determined quite easily and definitively without much, if any, doubt remaining, if one knows how. The Sandy Hook hoax for reference. This was a completely staged event by the aforementioned forces, one of them. Investigations into this hoax tend to be overcomplicated. Incidentally, this is a symptom of inversion, as the simple gets overcomplicated while the complicated gets oversimplified by default. In this world, everything is upside down and backwards. Investigations often focus too much on highly specific details and insignificant, even irrelevant, side issues instead of focusing on the core issues. A common result of this approach is that investigators get lost in complexity, leading to inaccuracy, confusion, and even pattern paranoia, resulting in a loss of objectivity and reliability. Exposing a hoax like Sandy Hook doesn't require airplane hangars full of hyper-detailed evidence that inevitably becomes convoluted and confused. It suffices to point out that the so-called grieving families have not cried a single tear in over 10 years in thousands of pictures and videos. They act like they are crying, but they never actually cry, which is easy to confirm. And that's it. That exposes the hoax beyond any reasonable doubt. Nothing more needs to be added because it's definitive. This efficiency in investigation and insight is the result of knowing how to focusing on the core issues, and the same methodology can be applied to any subject, be it events or personalities. It's not complicated and it's not time-consuming. It only takes a couple minutes. The conclusion right up front: Trump is definitely not one of them. This is explained in detail and conclusively in the following. On the contrary, Trump is countering the Luciferian death cult and its ability to assert its interests in the world by tactically and strategically disrupting not only its political agendas, but also its underlying brainwashing programs. Such actions can never be good cop, bad cop show actions, as they are destructive on a fundamental level. They go far beyond any reasonable boundary within which a controlled opposition must operate. Words are not always just words. Words can be formulas, instructions, revelations that have a far-reaching and lasting impact on people's knowledge and consciousness and can change individual lives and world events. Just for someone to be a puppet, it needs a puppeteer. No puppeteer, no puppet. The supreme apex puppeteer, at least in this world, is the one-eyed devil Sauron, a real existing entity, not just a symbol found on dollar bills and in Hollywood, rest assured. One of the old ones, an ancient extra-dimensional terror that haunts entire civilizations. This entity is the master of all Darksiders, including the Reptilians, the Greys, and the Dark Nordics, and its most direct subordinates or puppets in this world are the Death Cultists. The Death Cult is the top of the Black Pyramid, the Great Illuminati Pyramid, which consists of many smaller pyramids, secret societies, politics, banking, military, science, pharma, media. Those who genuinely and substantially oppose the existential interests of the death cult cannot be puppets, because there is no puppet master beyond the one-eyed death cult to whom all other puppet masters from all the smaller pyramids are subordinate. To oppose the highest puppet master is to oppose all puppet masters, all ring bearers of the Lord of the Rings, and in the only way that really matters, good versus evil. How does one oppose the death cult puppet master? 1. By denying the death cult and its dark entity masters the death energy they need to sustain themselves and exist in this world. Two, war and disease are the supreme generals of death. Those who oppose them oppose the death cult. 3. The mother of war is censorship, not propaganda, as many mistakenly assume. Propaganda is merely a subordinate tool of censorship, used to fill the void left by censorship to create the illusion that people have the ability to inform themselves freely. Warlords rely on the suppression and control of information censorship because all wars are based on ignorance. Propaganda lies are not enough because the truth is much more powerful than lies. 1 liter of oil can pollute up to 1 million liters of water, and 1 pure truth can neutralize 1 million lies. 4. What is most clearly directed against war and disease are: A. The promotion and campaigning for peace. B. Guaranteeing freedom of speech. And C. Causal research into disease to find out how it is caused by death cult measures rather than cure research, largely a death cult diversion to prevent causal research and eliminate the causes of disease.
These are bad people. These are sick people we're dealing with. Violent and dangerously deranged.
Do you want Ukraine to win this war?
I don't think in terms of winning and losing. I think in terms of getting it settled so we stop killing all these people. You have
Mr.
to
President,
get Europe.
can I just follow up on that, because that's a really important
Excuse me,
statement
let me
that
just
you just
follow
made
up.
there. Can you say if you want Ukraine or Russia to win this war?
I want everybody to stop dying. They're dying. Russians and Ukrainians. I want them to stop dying. You're a nasty person, I'll tell you.
The vicious snake.
Such statements are more than just words. They signify the rejection of lower concepts of consciousness of the death cult and the introduction of higher concepts of consciousness into the collective consciousness of mankind. It is a concept of reason, of morality, of empathy, of sanity. It disrupts the prevailing satanic narratives of war and death as a natural part of human existence. Introducing concepts of higher consciousness into a world dominated by a psychotic death cult and prevailing delusional perceptions is akin to injecting a vampire with garlic. This is not in the interest of the death cultists or the vampires. The perceptions, needs, and desires of the death cultists are in extreme contrast to those of the relatively sane human population, which is why the death cult must use sophisticated lies and deceptions to cloak their dark agenda in political and social clothing. They twist and distort the truth, manipulate, provoke, and maintain conflict, always with the goal of causing suffering and death in mind. That is the actual, true goal of all their undertakings. Everything else is a means to an end. One such death cult perception is the narrative, the idea, the worldview that war is an integral part of human nature, which it is not, and that war is an unavoidable means of politics, which it is not, and that the deaths of soldiers and civilians in such supposedly legitimate wars would be a legitimate event, which it is not. They want death, but they can't just ask humans to kill each other and get sick on purpose just because they have to construct ideas, narratives, and theories to achieve this through deception. These are artificially constructed abstract mazes. They have no solid basis in reality. They are pure invented nonsense. They do contain some legitimate points, as they need to build some truths into their mazes to attract as many as possible, not just the utterly stupid, but also the intelligent, who are, however, susceptible to ideology and intellectualism. The weapons of mass destruction narrative is one such maze, but this is a smaller maze, a maze within larger mazes. The big maze of lies is that war would be legitimate at all. The pandemic narrative is also a smaller maze. The big maze of lies is that virology would be a legitimate science. The CNN snake deploys the big maze, which is that the Ukraine-Russia conflict is about who wins. But this conflict is based on satanic mazes, abstract, theoretical, hypothetical, artificial bullshit. 999 out of 1,000 soldiers in this conflict would not be able to give a semi-coherent answer as to why this war is even happening and why they are dying in it. They would answer in propagandistic phrases, theories, and regurgitated narratives fed to them by reptilian politicians and journalists. They are mind-controlled batteries, cattle of the death cult. The reasons for their suffering and death are nonsensical theories constructed by the reptilians. Trump responds to the CNN snake by dismissing the whole maze. In essence, he is saying that everything the CNN snake says is absolutely illegitimate. He's not just disagreeing with this or that argument within the maze, he's completely rejecting the maze, the imposed artificial narrative, the satanic sub-reality. Trump says it's not about this reason or that reason that would legitimize dying. He says there's fundamentally no reason to die. And the CNN snake doesn't know how to respond because it can't operate outside the artificial satanic maze, not for long before it reveals itself to be a demon obsessed with war and death. The snake relies on mazes being accepted as legitimate perceptions, as aspects of reality. It's not the first time Trump has done something like this either.
But just 10 minutes before the strike, the president says he changed his mind, explaining on NBC's Meet the Press that when he asked a general about the potential death toll, he didn't like the answer.
And I thought about it for a second. I said, you know what? They shot down an unmanned drone, plane, whatever you want to call it. And here we are sitting with 150 dead people. That would have taken place probably within a half an hour after I said go ahead. Yeah. And I didn't like it. I didn't think it was proportionate.
Have you ever heard Bush or Obama make statements and decisions like that? No, of course not. Bush murdered 1 million Iraqi civilians with made-up lies about weapons of mass destruction, and he laughed about it afterward.
Those weapons of mass destruction got to be somewhere. Nope, no weapons over there. Maybe under here. Oops, this photo wasn't supposed to be in here.
Obama started wars and kept them going, repeatedly murdering innocent civilians like wedding ceremony attendees with drone strikes. It's obvious that one shouldn't murder 150 humans for shooting down a pile of malfunctioning flying junk. Obvious to the sane, who are not in the majority in this world. Trump has refused to do it, and his relatively moderate statement, appealing to the insane, still sounds a bit lukewarm to the sane, but he can't appear more bluntly sane, pacifist, or even morally judgmental. All romanticism aside, humans are an aggressive, tribal, largely self-serving, warring breed, and empathy is quickly mistaken for weakness in this corrupted, dark world, if not expressed most delicately and resolutely. Being kind, if not careful, leads to being perceived as weak and, as a result, a victim to be exploited and trampled on like a carpet. Empathy is only respected when it is expressed with strength. Peace through strength. This is a motto that Trump regularly proclaims. One must also avoid being judgmental because that quickly insults people's egos, puts them on the defensive, and reinforces even the most ludicrous positions just to make a point. Peace through deterrence was once a well-known concept. Only the strong can be pacifists because the weak have no choice but to submit. A strong military is not a danger or a great evil per se, as long as it simply sits and is maintained to remind those whom it concerns that using it is an option. Being good is a very narrow path in this world.
If we don't have free speech, then we just don't have a free country. It's as simple as that. If this most fundamental right is allowed to perish, then the rest of our rights and liberties will topple. Just like dominoes, one by one, they'll go down. That's why today I'm announcing my plan to shatter the left-wing censorship regime and to reclaim the right to free speech for all Americans. And reclaim is a very important word in this case because they've taken it away. In recent weeks, bombshell reports have confirmed that a sinister group of deep state bureaucrats, Silicon Valley tyrants, left-wing activists, and depraved corporate news media have been conspiring to manipulate and silence the American people. They have collaborated to suppress vital information on everything from elections to public health. The censorship cartel must be dismantled and destroyed, and it must happen immediately. And here's my plan. First, within hours of my inauguration, I will sign an executive order banning any federal department or agency from colluding with any organization, business, or person to censor, limit, categorize, or impede the lawful speech of American citizens. In recent decades, there has been an unexplained and alarming growth in the prevalence of chronic illnesses and health problems, especially in children. We've seen a stunning rise in autism, autoimmune disorders, obesity, infertility, serious allergies, and respiratory challenges. It's time to ask, what is going on? Is it the food that they eat, the environment that we live in, the overprescription of certain medications? Is it the toxins and chemicals that are present in our homes? Every year we spend hundreds of billions of dollars to treat these chronic problems rather than looking at what is causing them in the first place. Too often our public health establishment is too close to big pharma. They make a lot of money, big pharma, big corporations and other special interests, and does not want to ask the tough questions about what is happening to our children's health. If big pharma defrauds American patients and taxpayers or puts profits above people, they must be investigated and held accountable. When I'm back in the White House, I will establish a special presidential commission of independent minds who are not bought and paid for by Big Pharma, and I will charge them with investigating what is causing the decades-long increase in chronic illnesses. I understand Big Pharma, I believe, better than anybody else. I know where they're coming from. And then I will ask them to publish recommendations for how every American child can have a safe and healthy childhood. This is a conversation that is long overdue, and it's a conversation that American families deserve. American families must have this conversation, and they must have a leader, a president, who can do something about this problem. And I will do that. Thank you.
Trump promotes and campaigns for peace, free speech, and causal medical research, not only through statements, but also through practical policies. He denies the death cult its primary existential interest and therefore cannot be a puppet of it or of anyone who serves the death cult, all the smaller pyramids within the big pyramid. And that's it. That's enough to establish that he's not one of them. It's the equivalent of the missing tears of the grieving families of the Sandy Hook hoax. It carries that much weight. There very well may be legitimate differences with Trump's policies and who he is and so on, even serious issues, but that doesn't justify the one of them attribute. That label should be reserved for those who clearly deserve it. Otherwise, confusion arises. But he pushed the vaccine. No, he didn't. The Luciferian death cult and all its pyramids, science, academia, big tech agencies pushed it through tens of thousands of government officials and experts in global media and internet platforms. Darksiders called it Operation Perfect Storm. Trump positioned himself between the pushers and the pusher-controlled part of the population who demanded the vaccine because they were programmed to perceive it as a matter of their survival. Trump passively provided it to those who demanded it, not that he had a choice to prevent the planned perpetual lockdown, new normal and mandatory regular boosters, economic collapse and martial law, while simultaneously declaring that the pandemic was a hoax, verbatim, telling everyone directly and repeatedly that the vaccine wasn't even necessary, and promoting several alternative cures. It was a very complicated situation that is still ongoing. He is working to resolve it. He recently added Robert Kennedy Jr. to his administration, a man who calls the C-19 vaccine the deadliest vaccine in history. These are not the actions of a sinister pusher, but of a man who finds himself in a dilemma where his enemies are legion and his options limited. For an in-depth look at the situation, watch the video. Trump, the C-19 vaccine, the deeper occult truth about Operation Warp Speed. Once the answer to a question is found, decisions can be made on that basis. That is why most remain inactive. They are passive observers of developments. They are stuck in the endless cycle of complicating things and endlessly pursuing questions and indecision. It is not necessary, but the goal of some is not to get answers. Their pursuit is limited to seeking answers or asking questions, but they never want them answered or can never have them answered. Either because they believe they can never be answered, or because they feel emotionally comfortable in their current state, or because they don't want to deal with the consequences of an answer. Nothing can be done, to each his own. But those who stagnate in a dynamic situation always perish. Evolution devours everything that is not prepared to adapt. for the various genetic streams. They can be found on both sides of the spiritual polarities, certainly in different percentages, at least in this world, but a primary focus on them is not sufficiently reliable. There is conflict between them all. Even within the strictest dark hierarchies, there are forms of dissent and upheaval. This results in various enemy of my enemy situations, at least temporarily, which present opportunistic chances that one would be wise to evaluate pragmatically for their utility to one's own cause. Wisdom is above truth. A principle that, if not followed, leads to premature, downright foolish revelations that are detrimental to one's own interests. Whether guided by reason, pragmatism, or ruthlessness, self-sabotage is not recommended. Exopolitics, the interaction between humans and non-humans, is as convoluted as geopolitics. Good and evil are ultimately the essential dividing line. What is the Luciferian death cult? The Luciferian death cult is the tip of the top of the Illuminati pyramid. It is from here that the entire Dark's hierarchy receives its orders. Here, alien hybrids and possessed Satanists interact directly with non-physical demonic entities from dark dimensions through satanic rituals, the opening of interdimensional pathways and communication, instruction, and possession through them. These entities and their cultists feed on the energy of death, misery, agony, and suffering. This gives them vitality, power, insight, and psychic abilities. They resonate with death, decay, and horror. They gain satisfaction, pleasure, and enjoyment from torturing and murdering, especially when the victims are innocent and of high vitality and life energy, which is why they particularly target children. They enjoy the sight and stench of rotting corpses riddled with maggots. They stab, cut, rape, break bones, amputate arms, cut off noses, gouge out eyes, force-feed feces, mutilate genitals, force to murder, rape and mutilate others, poison, electrocute, skin and boil their victims alive, leave them to starve and feed them alive to dogs and nightmare creatures. They are grotesquely perverse sadists, deeply mentally ill deviants who worship death. The extensive, brutal, and bizarre torture and murder practices of South American cartels and gangs such as MS-13 give an insight into the nature of the death cult. The Aztec Empire was one of the great usurpations of civilization by the death cult. Even today, cultural and karmic remnants of that time seem to prevail in the area. This is most evident in the form of the MS-13 gang from South America, a satanic reptilian proxy group that regularly performs satanic blood and death rituals, which are typical reptilian acts. The death cult and the satanic reptilian hybrid bloodlines are behind the orchestration of every major war in human history. They have had many facades throughout the ages. Their basic organizational structure has remained the same. It is a spider's web with the Black Widow, the spider of death, at its center, with secret societies near the center through which the spider recruits its agents from the population, like Skullbones, which unsurprisingly is an initiation organization of the death cult. Would you or someone you know personally give the order to drop phosphorus bombs on civilian villages for whatever reason? Most probably not. But George Bush and Obama would. Because they are reptilian hybrids of the satanic bloodline. And the mainstream media reporters would report on wars and casualties with nonchalance, fueling the fires of resentment and hatred with great zeal, because most of them are also satanic reptilian hybrids, who are all deeply sick psychopaths.